Okay. So I'm going to quickly brief up about the agenda for the program. So every session is going to start at 9 a.m. and the first 10 minutes is going to be the quiz, followed by a 10 minutes of homework review session, and then we would be having a 40 minutes of lecture notes. Then we have a short 10-minute break. Then we have a 15 minutes of lab session where the kids get to work on problems that they learned out of the lecture notes. We have tried to make it as simple as possible. So the main intention of this program is that, not like any other traditional program where you just, learn some concept and you get stuck up somewhere and, stay stuck up forever. No, it shouldn't be like that. So if you get stuck up, please, our instructors are available before the session starts, like around 8:30. Maybe you could log in a little early, or you could stay back after the session and get the, clarifications. So that way, you just, expand your knowledge base. So that's it about the program. So now we have the primary instructor who's going to be Dhruva Madhan. Would you like to introduce yourself, Dhruva?
Hi, my name's Dhruva. I'm 16 and I'm in 10th grade. And I've been into coding for a long, long time, since like second or third grade, I believe. And I hope you guys have a lot of fun with this course.
Okay, and our secondary instructor is going to be Manmohan Singh. Manmohan, would you like to introduce yourself?
I am Manmohan. I'm a sophomore at Taft Charter High School, and I've been programming since seventh grade as a hobby. Um, uh, so yeah,
Okay. So we have Shrish, the student volunteer. Would you like to introduce yourself, Shrish?
Yeah, hi, I'm Shrish, and I'm currently a junior at Arcadia High School. I first got into coding when I was young by looking at simple programs from scratch, and I hope you guys enjoy this course.
Thank you. Thank you all. So it's time for us to get started, I believe. So I would like to know, like, um, I would just like to see how many of you have, done with the installation. So if you're done with installation, please raise your hands. So anyways, we will just get started because the initial, few slides, we are not going to work on Visual Studio. It's going to take a while for us. So until we reach that stage, you could still continue with the installation process. Let that run in the background. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
Awesome. Okay, guys. So over to Dhruva and Manmohan. You guys could share the slide and then get started off.
so right now we're just gonna run over the basics of how programming in the language that we're gonna program in works. We're gonna program in a language called C sharp. That's this C hashtag here. It's pronounced C sharp. That's the language we're gonna be using in Unity. So we're just gonna cover like the basics of programming using Visual Studio.
So to create a new project in Visual Studio, when you first open Visual Studio up, just as it says right there, there should be a button that says create a new project. And then from there, you're going to want to search in that search bar that pops up, C Sharp console app. And after clicking on that, you're going to want to name your project, and then you're going to want to select these settings here to make sure that there's no mistakes with what we're doing.
Could you show them an example? Maybe in the Visual Studio, you could open and try to create a project and show them so that, they could also try parallelly.
Sure, I'm
Do
gonna
you have to
demonstrate.
sign into Visual Studio?
No, you
No,
don't.
you don't.
Here, I'm gonna demonstrate how to do that in Visual Studio.
But is it gonna save if you don't sign
Yeah,
in?
it will.
Okay, so just skip the sign in.
Yep.
So yeah, on the right here, create a new project. You can search up C# console
Manmohan,
app.
let's go a bit slow. Actually, give some time for them to follow. Okay, keep it a little slow.
All right. So you can search C# console app, and then the first one, it should be good enough. On the bottom right, you can click next. Then here you can give your product a name. It doesn't matter what you name it. It doesn't affect anything at all. And then if you want, you can change the location on your computer, but that is not necessary as well. Don't worry about everything else in here. It's not going to be necessary. Once you do that, on the bottom right is next. And these settings are pretty important. So what you want to, especially do not use top-level statements, and make sure this is enable native AOT publish is unchecked. And then using .NET 8.0. And then on the bottom left, bottom right is create. This might take a little bit depending on how fast your computer is. So just give it some time, and you should see something along the lines of this on your screen.
And so once you're in the screen, if you ever
What do you have to search to? And
C# console app. So if you take a look in the Visual Studio thing, the way you'd run your code is you'd look at that like green arrow right there, right? And you'd click it. And when you click it, what happens is a new window would open up that is basically the console. And it takes a little bit of time, but once it opens up, you'll see something just like that. The default code whenever you create a new project is always going to be hello world, so that's how you know that it's properly working and everything's good.
Feel free to close the console once you've done this.
Yeah, you can click the X or you can press any button.
Also pointing out the name that you have next to this arrow depends on what you call the project. So as long as it's a solid green arrow that you're clicking, it'll be fine.
Okay,
So
so we're moving on to the basics right now. So Manmohan, if you'd like to take over.
so for programming, for actually like writing code, where it says static void main, there are two brackets after it. There's an opening and closing bracket. For now, you will write all your code in between these brackets. So if you want to write a new line of code, you press enter and then write it on this line. Um, so this is the area you can write your code, not after this bracket. Even though this right here is the same line as the bracket, it doesn't count as being inside the brackets. So in here, you'll write your code, and code is read from top to bottom. So if I have this line of code, and if I copy it to the next line, the computer will run this line of code, and then it will run this line of code from top to bottom. Uh, there are some cases where you can have them on the same line, but that makes things more complicated. So just don't do that. And after every instruction, there is always a semicolon. There are some exceptions, but we'll get to that later. You don't need to worry about that for now. But yeah, always remember your semicolons, because that tells the computer that this is the end of an instruction and that it should run this code. But you can try experimenting with changing the what's inside of these quotation marks and seeing if that affects anything when you run the code.
So right now we're going to move on to data types. So when it comes to data types, there are five main types, like five main simple types. You have an integer, which is basically whole numbers, like 10, 5, 620, basically any whole number without any decimals. You have floats, which are essentially just like numbers with decimals, just decimal numbers, floating decimal points. So like 2.2 or the value of pi 3.14. Then you have characters or char for short, which only stores like a single character or symbol. So like you show characters by having your character within single quotes, which is basically like the button on your computer that you just press for double quotes, but without holding shift. And examples would be like A, C, and D as you see on screen. You have strings, which are basically like a string of characters or like words, sentences. If you wanted to say, like, when you see the console.write line there that says hello world, that is a string. And you know it's a string because it has double quotes around it. And finally, you have Booleans, or for short, bools, which store true or false values, yes or no, one or zero, basically binary values, and on and off. Now, if we move on to how to make variables. So, how the basic like form of making variables is you have the type space, then you have the name of your variable. Then you have an equal sign and whatever you want to set your variable to. Or if you don't want to set your variable to anything yet, just have the type and then the name with a semicolon. So examples are as follows on screen, right? You have int year equals 2023. Int is an integer, right? So it's a whole number. You're naming your variable year and you're setting that variable equal to 2023. Is there any questions so far? Okay.
Okay, you know what, Dhruva? Let's pause here. I'm gonna have a pop-up quiz now.
Um, did everyone get the results back?
I'm
Yes.
glad 81% got the answer right. So good job, guys.
Just to reiterate again, floats are numbers with decimals. Now, on how to make a variable, like we mentioned before, you just have the type, for example, int, float, string, char, bool, any of those. You have based off of what you need. You have the name of it. So, for example, if you wanted to store like the amount of cats you have in your house, you'd be like int amount of cats is equal to, and then let's say you had two cats, you'd be equal to two semicolon. So if you see on the screen there in the Visual Studio, that's an example. And let's say you wanted to store just like the name of your grandmother. So you'd have something along the lines of string grandma's name would be equal to, I don't know, what about Sam? Or hee hee ha. But the point stands that essentially strings can have words, names, anything in them, as long as it's like just a consecutive amount of characters or even a single character. And then let's finally assume that you had a very, very specific amount of rice in your house. So let's say you had like a float of pounds of rice in your house. And let's say, how about you have around, yeah, 2.12 pounds of rice in your house, because that's obviously how much you need. But these are just quick examples of how you would create variables. Is everyone clear on that?
Yeah.
Also, I'm just gonna add, when you're giving a name to your variables, don't use any special characters. I mean, you can use dashes. No, you can't use dashes, sorry. You can use underscores. If you want to separate out words, you can use underscores if you want to. But you don't use special characters. Don't use like quotes. Don't use semicolons. Don't. You can use numbers. In your name, but don't use any special characters. The only special character you can use is the underscore, which is the same key as the minus key on your keyboard. So those are the only keys you can use. You can't have spaces because that causes errors. It confuses the computer. So no special characters in your name, only underscores.
Okay, time for another question, okay?
It's a little quirk we didn't mention, so let's see if everyone can notice it.
Yeah. Actually, they got it. Yeah, majority answering the right one.
Okay, let me just explain the correct answer. The correct answer would
No, no,
be.
hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold
Oh
on.
wait, oh
It's
wait,
not done yet.
the poll didn't
We
end. My
have 10
bad.
more seconds. Yeah.
We're just eager
You
to
gave a
show you who
clue.
does this.
Okay, it ends now.
All right, now I can explain the correct answer. It would be float. Let's go float. Float AB is equal to 6.28 F, the semicolon. This F is important because it tells the computer that this is a float specifically. So you need to have that F. You also need to tell the computer what type of variable it is. So that's where you need to have the float at the beginning and obviously the semicolon at the end.
For those of you who were paying attention and who noticed that little quirk, props to you guys. Like, genuinely, that's a good job. We didn't even mention that.
56% got it right. Good job, guys.
Could you put an integer in a float?
I mean, you could have like, for example, float AB equal to 3F. The only thing that really the only thing that really like changes is that when you do any like math with it, it's still considered a float, so you would end up with a decimal value.
See, writing this is the exact same thing as writing it with a 0.0 at the end.
Yeah.
So it's still considered a floating point number. Moving on to input and output. So if you look at the code here, we have the console.writeLine command. If you run the code, this will output whatever is in the parentheses to the console. So if I replace this with let's say a 2.0 F, it will then write 2.0 in the console. We'll write the number in there. If I put an integer in there, if I just put 2, it will write 2 to the console. If I put in true, it will write true to the console. So whatever you put in here, it will write out to the console. You can put in a string. It will write this to the console. This is useful for knowing that your code works, for getting feedback, and for knowing when it doesn't work. Because then you can use this to figure out what's wrong by having it tell you incorrect data. You can also use the command console.readLine to receive user input. Now, right now, this won't do anything because we need to tell it where to store the user inputs. So console.readLine gives you a string variable. So you need to define a string. I'm just going to call it user input and set it equal to console.readLine here. So what this will do is when I run the code, nothing's going to happen because it's going to wait for me to type in a line of string. So if I type in hello world here, and then I press enter, it then says hi and the program ends. So what it does is it waits for the user input, and then once it gets that, it sets it to user input, the variable, and then it runs the next line of code, which writes hi to the console. So if I close this, and instead of writing just hi, if I write user input back out into the console, and I run the code, whatever I type here, if I type hello, it will write hello again because it's outputting exactly what I give it. You can also add strings together. So if I have another string that says hello right here and use a plus to add it with the user input right here, then it'll write hello and then add on whatever I added. So let's try running it again. Let's type in hello. You would notice it says hello, hello. Now notice there's no spaces there. It just adds them however they work. It doesn't add any spaces. So let's say I wanted to have a user input their name. You can have console write line asking the user to input their name. Let's say, please input your name. And then instead of calling this user input, let's call this user name. And then we can have your name is. And then keep in mind, I'm putting a space here because without the space, the username will just be right up against the colon, which we don't want that. So let's see what happens when we run this. It says, please input your name. Let's say I put in my name. And it says, your name is, there's a space, and then it's my name. So you can play around with this at home if and when you get Visual Studio running. And you can play around with this and see what happens.
In like the code given on the slide, is the double slash meant to be a comment?
No, man.
Oh yes, double slashes. If I put them in here, it shows green. This line will be ignored by the computer. So you can use this to explain what your code is doing or just have some notes, whatever you want. You can put these double slashes anywhere and the rest of the line is going to be ignored by the computer.
Are there any other questions?
All right. I'm gonna give another pop question, okay?
So the majority of you got this right. The correct answer is char xyz is equal to, in single quotes, A. As we previously stated, when you have a character, a char, you're only supposed to enclose it in single quotes, and there should only be one letter or symbol inside of it, because a character is just a single thing. Strings with quotes would be, so like for the people who answered char xyz is equal to double quotes A, you would have to change that to a string because characters or chars can only be set to a single quote answer or single quote value. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
What would like the
So,
purpose of a char be?
Um, Chars are like kind of goofy, honestly. It's like you can, I mean, if you're just looking for like a single letter, like maybe at like the beginning of a sentence.
I mean, chars are used to make strings, but you don't need to do that because the language does that for you. But you need to have this. You need to have the character before you can have the string because strings are just a bunch of characters.
And as long as you like notice the difference between like initializing like character chars and strings, it'll be fine. We don't really use chars that much, so don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can
or
do that.
for example, like if you have like a program that inputs like a multiple choice question, like you could store what the user inputted, like which option they selected, like A, B, C, or D. It just depends on what you're trying to do with your code.
Okay. Any further questions on this, guys?
Yeah, what if you have a float? What do you do?
As in,
For
what do
the
you mean by that?
quotes?
If you have a floating point number, you don't put quotes at all. So if I make a random float here, you don't put quotes at all, but you do put this F here, and then your semicolon. So for floats, you put an F to indicate that's a floating point number. And then for integers, you don't put anything, you just type in your number and then your semicolon.
What about a bool?
For a bool, you only have two options. You can either put true or you can put false. They're both going to be lowercase, and yeah, you only have those two options.
Thanks.
Wait, when it says output, that means like do some code and then it should like when you run it, it should display or say.
When it says output, it means that the what you write should be like in the console, like what Manmohan showed earlier.
Like do you mean like taking from like the user input or like
In this scenario, no, just like sending to console like a string.
oh I think I understand.
For problem two, are we supposed to output it as a date or a string?
Well, if you fall, I mean, a day as in like when we say day, I'm pretty sure we mean like Monday, Sunday, Wednesday, things like
Oh,
that. So
okay.
it'll be a string.
I'm going to show how to do number one. It would just be a console dot write line, and then in double quotations, you'd have the name of your school. So in my case, Taft or high school. And then for number two, it'll be something very similar. It'll be console dot write line, and then it'll just be today's Saturday, so it'll just be, and then this should be 1 and 2. So when you run it, you should see the name of your school here, and then the day. All right, question 3 is create a variable and named light and assign it the value of true. So how you would do that is you have a bool, because a true or false value is a boolean, so you define it as bool. Then call it light, because that's what the question asked. Then you have the equal sign and a lowercase true with the semicolon. That'd be the answer for question 2. Or not, sorry, not 2, 3.
And for question number 4, it says create a variable to represent pi. Well, pi is an irrational number, isn't it? It's a forever going on decimal number, or meaning you'd have a float named pi, which is equal to 3.14 approximately. F, remember the F. And that would be your answer for question number 4. Now, has everyone done 5 already? So for number 5, it says create a variable to store the current year. Well, if we've seen the year, we know that it is definitely not a decimal number, right? I mean, it's 2024. There's no decimal there. So you'd have an integer. You'd have int year is equal to 2024 semicolon. It's a pretty simple one. Now we're going to give you guys a second set of questions that will give you some time to work on.
How do you actually run the program?
So if you look at like the top, you'll notice that green arrow. Do you see that?
Green
Oh,
solid arrow. It should be next to the name of your project.
yeah.
In my case, console app 4. If you click it, you'll see something different here. If you just create your project, you'll see hello world here. But you should
Oh, okay.
see this basic screen with whatever your output is, and then this text here. And then you can close this window whenever you want.
So has everyone finished at least the first couple questions?
No, hold up.
Okay, yeah.
I
Take your turn.
finished 6 and 7.
Okay, so for number 6, create a variable named name to store the name Elizabeth. Well, the name Elizabeth would probably be a string, right? Because it's consecutive characters. So you'd have string name is equal to, and in quotation marks, Elizabeth. That should be your answer for question number 6. And for question number 7, create separate variables to store each of your initials. Well, it depends on how many initials you have. Let's say that you only had 2 initials like me, Dhruva Madhan, right? You have Char, first initial maybe, and you'd set that to like your first name's initial. So like D maybe. And then you'd have another Char, name it like second initial. And then in my case, it would be my last name. So I would end up having a character that's M. So that's just an example of the characters for each initial.
All right. For number 8, the question says to output your initials into the console, formatted such as ESB, which is just an example. So again, for this question, it depends on how many initials you have in your name. So for this, we simply just have to write the code that console.writeLine. And then we're just going to use the same variables that we used last name. So we're just going to use first initial, the variable name, and then plus we're going to have a dot to separate the initial, and then plus the last initial, second initial. So this should print your initials, and then yep. So do you guys have any questions on this one? Any errors? All right, moving on to question number 9. It says to write a line of code that asks the user for their name and store their answer. So for this one, again, we just have to take the input, which is first you have to write like what is the name, because the user does not know what to write. So first we'll write console.writeLine, what is your name, with a question mark. And then we have to take the user input. So for that, we're just going to store it in a string because it's a name. So string, so for that, we have to write string name is equals to console.readLine, which is basically just going to read whatever the user writes on the console. And yeah, that's basically question number 8. Any questions?
Also, something to note is we already have this variable right here that's called name. So having another variable with the same name it will cause an error. So we can change this to something called username, and that will fix the error. So make sure not to have 2 variables with the same name.
Okay. One thing before we move on to question number 10, I think some of you guys might be having a problem with this, is that whenever you use console.readLine, it returns your whatever the user writes as a string. So for example, if you want to read an integer, you have to cast it. So for that casting method is convert.toInt32. So that is the method that transfers a string into an integer if it's possible. So for this one, we'll just do this is what we have to do. You have to just take in the whatever the user entered and then um cast it to an integer, and then we basically just have to uh yeah, we just have to convert it to a integer so it matches up. Do we have any
So,
more questions? Yeah.
so the conversion thing that Shrish just showed you is something we didn't go over, but that is really helpful to know for user input. If you notice there it says convert dot to int 32, you can convert things to different variable types. Like you could convert it to a like char, for example, and it would only give you like a single letter. But the point is that knowing this conversion will help you out for like any future endeavors when you have to convert strings to like numbers or vice versa.
Yeah.
Also like to point out that console.readline is inside of the parentheses after 2 and 32. So you need to make sure that this is inside the parentheses, and then you have the semicolon afterwards.
Yeah, so that's basically all the classwork. If you
We are
guys
done.
don't have, yeah.
Okay. All right then. I have two more pop quiz questions.
So one of them is up right now. Let's see what y'all get. You guys
Yes.
got 60 seconds.
Time's up. So I'm gonna share the result.
So the correct answer should be string user input is equal to console.readline, open and close parentheses, comma. Now that is something that we did show in class, and I'm really happy for everyone who noticed it.
Yeah, I'm really
Just a
glad that
reminder.
86% got it. Okay, so we have another question left. So guys, I would love to see 100% for this. Please don't disappoint me. Come on.
Honestly, I'd be surprised if anyone didn't choose the right one.
So far it's 100%.
Real quick, we're gonna share off the results for the. Okay, so correct answer is Boolean. Everyone got that right. That's good. Boolean store true or false values. That is correct. And so I'm really thankful for everyone here so far for being really attentive. I'm the fact that a lot of you guys, the majority, have been here focusing intently is very important to us, because especially because this is an online class, and we are glad that you guys have followed so far. So thank you. Is there any like last minute questions? I know Srihari, you had a question that you are sending in chat right now, so we will get that sorted. But is there anyone else?
Right, so I'm gonna quickly now show you how to update your scores. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So you first go to agoramatcircle.org and then log in. So I'm using a demo user over here. You basically need to use your, login credentials over here. Okay. So once you're in this page, the dashboard, so first step is to go to the class material. This is the place where you would be accessing all the class material, okay? So for now, for our program, we have only published the curriculum and the lecture notes. Once this class is over, I'm going to publish the homework, okay? So you basically have to take a printout of that, work on the questions, mark your answers in that sheet, and after that, you have to record the answers back. So that you do by going to update score. Once you go there, you have to choose the program. In our case, it's going to be Introduction to Game Development. If you're enrolled to more than one program, all those would be listed there. So please make sure you're picking the right program there. And then spring session 1. Today we didn't have quiz. So I'm just going to show you a demo for the homework. Okay. I'm going to click on that, and then you need to click Get Answer Sheet. Until this point, was it clear?
It's
Yeah,
clear.
Okay. Okay. So once we do the get sheet, we have like, uh, the bubble sheet over here. So you need to mark the answers. I'm just showing, overall, I'm not sure which is the right answer. I'm just randomly clicking something over here to see, what the score is going to be. Hopefully, I don't get a 0 in this. Okay. So once you fill out everything, then you just go hit the submit. Okay. When you do that, automatically that gets stored in the system. And please keep in mind that you could do only once. Okay. When you do once, it gets locked after that. You cannot try. And in case if there is any correction beyond that, you have to reach out to me via message center. So this is the message center through which you send the messages to me. Okay. And report card is where you could go and view your scores. Any questions so far? And you do the same process for the quiz. Okay. Instead of the homework, next session, say for example, session 2, when you come in, the first 10 minutes, right? We would publish the quiz. You have to immediately take a print out of that and then start, writing your questions. Or if you cannot take a print, no worries. We would anyways be, sharing the screen for that particular document. So you would still be able to view the questions there. Okay. So just take a piece of paper and then note down, the choices for all the questions. And then this is how you enter the score. Um, um, you know, uh, Go to the update score and then pull the quiz, get the answer sheet, and start entering the choices there. Plan your last 2 minutes of the quiz to do this task. Any questions so far?
Wait, if we get it wrong, will we know like which ones we got wrong?
You mean the answer key, is it? I
Yeah.
think we would be anyways be publishing the answer key also there. Like that'll have the solution. So maybe whatever you entered, you could always cross check with that and see what went wrong.
Okay.
Okay. All right then. Um, and if you have any questions related to accessing your document or anything else related to the program, you could always send a message, to me via message center. And then if you have any technical doubts, you could stay back now after this meeting. Manmohan and Dhruva are there to help you guys out. For the guys who still haven't done with the installation, you could stay back so that, we could sort that out so that next session, we don't spend much of a time for, sorting out the installation issues. I think other than that, we are pretty much done for today. I'm going to publish the homework in a while. Any questions from you guys?
No, I don't have any questions on my side.
Okay, so for people who are good, I think we are done for today. And those who need further clarification, I would recommend them to stay back in the same bridge. Thank you so much, guys. Session 1 was amazing. I know we did have some initial hiccup in terms of the installation. I do understand the initial setup, often takes some extra time. So I'm really glad that, we were able to sort it out at least for the 50% of the class today. So the rest we would work really hard to get it done before the session 2. Hopefully you guys had some good learning today and some takeaway from session 1. Thank you guys. Thank you. See you all next class.